Hi, my name is Serena, and this is just a video about what I read this month in June of 2026. In case you haven't seen my last video, this is kind of just a personal project for me to document what I read each month and just talk about it a bit more in depth. It's kind of an ongoing thing where I want to think more critically about everything I read, and regardless of the genre. So it is more of a personal thing, but if you happen to stumble across this on like via YouTube recommendations or via a link sent to you, I hope you can at least leave with a recommendation or at least the desire to think a bit more about something you read recently. So we'll get into it. My first book of the month was Harrow the Ninth, which is a kind of modern sci-fi fantasy romp. The first book titles it affectionately Lesbian Necromancers in Space, which is pretty accurate. I read the first book, Gideon the Ninth, a while back. I want to say in March, a couple months ago, before I started doing these videos, and I kind of bounced off of it. It was fun enough and enjoyable enough that I finished it, but it's just the main character was not for me. The prose was good, but the actual content, the narrative, was a little bit hard to follow at times, and also the humor was just not for me at all. Still, I enjoyed it enough to finish though, and my girlfriend loves the second book a lot more, so I still wanted to give it a shot, and wow, was she ever right. Tamsin Muir really impressed me with this one, especially coming after the kind of wishy-washy feeling of the last book, and following the titular character Harrow's necromantic journey was a lot more interesting. The book is a bit more serious and somber in tone and has a much more intriguing mystery to follow, especially with like a second-person narrator in Harrow that we know is an unreliable narrator. It just gives it this wonderful kind of ephemeral vibe in a way, where you kind of end up questioning everything you're reading. I was excited to see the second person perspective because I think it was really neat, especially the way they did it in this book. I read something recently else with a second person perspective in The Archive Undying by Emma Michael Candon, and it kind of didn't stick the landing, so I'm really glad to say that Tamsin Muir did in this one because it made me really happy to see. Overall, the book was just phenomenal. There's a lot to talk about in the book, but one thing I really did like was the kind of like secondary subplot theme of the nature of questioning the nature of divinity as Harrow is forced to grapple with the fact that the necromantic emperor that she worships as a god is also just a person. And it was just really phenomenal. I do think towards the end of the book it kind of drops the ball again. Not near to the extent to making it unenjoyable, but it does slip back into some of the drier, more overtly, explicitly comedic tones of the first book that just didn't work for me, and they still really don't. But it's just a slightly weak ending to what is a great book otherwise, so it didn't really bother me all that much. It was great. I'm looking forward to reading the next one. I think I actually have it over here. I'll probably get to that in the next couple of months, though probably a bit sooner. I am excited. My next book of the month was Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle. I read Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five a couple months ago. I hadn't read any Vonnegut and I enjoyed it greatly, so I kind of just wanted to get around to some more. This one details a man writing a memoir about the end of the world. Very fun. It's a very fun book, very meandering in the plot, but it was enjoyable to read nonetheless. Deeply, deeply funny, as a lot of Vonnegut's work is. The man is great at black comedy, and overall, pretty easy read too. There's some nice topic, or some conversation about religion in the book and the question about religion as a purpose and religious persecution is like a motivating factor in life. The main setting of the book being a fictional island nation that is a declared Christian nation, though is populated mostly by people who follow a fictional religion that the founders itself outlawed as kind of a way to give the impoverished citizens something to strive for, as well as a villain to rally against in a way. It kind of puts a lot of questions about what the purpose of religion is up in the air, and it was a good read. The rest of the themes in the book and like the rest of the thematic nuance in the book, though, I admit was a bit lost on me, and I kind of blame myself for that. I did mostly read this in like 10 to 20 minute spurts on my breaks at work, and I am not immune to neglecting to give a book my full attention. I still do think there is some meat in on the bones to this book that I can go back to and read, so I will have to swing back around and get to that, though I do have some other Vonnegut that I plan to read soon, namely Breakfast of Champions. Regardless, it was still a fun book, still a great read. There's my own kind of failings that made it fall short a little bit, I think, but I'll swing back to it eventually. My third book was The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett, and this is the first Discworld book. It's kind of my first foray into Discworld, and it follows a local reject wizard showing a tourist around in a collection of short stories about the two of them. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Very funny, and you can kind of see why Discworld took off the way it did and became such a phenomenon. I enjoyed it enough where I'll probably pick up some more Pratchett in the future, though I am a bit burnt out on high fantasy as always, though that's a bit of a holdover habit from my reading habits in high school and college that just kind of cooked the genre a bit for me. Regardless, it's pretty funny, and it's full of a lot of really, really well-written parody of a lot of that late 1900s kind of high fantasy. So if you enjoy that genre, I'm sure you'll love it here, because it's uproariously funny in all sorts of ways. Aside from that, though, there's not much to talk about it here. It's a pretty light read, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. And then my fourth book was The Price of Salt by Patricia Highsmith. I wanted a queer book for Pride Month, and this was my choice. It's been in my backlog for some time now, and I just now got around to it, and wow, do I regret not getting to it sooner. It was phenomenal. It follows Therese Belivet, a young seasonal department store worker in 1950s, 1960s New York, and her affair with an older woman by the name of Carol Aird, who's in the midst of a somewhat messy divorce. It is just a compelling queer story that really just is not afraid to touch on a lot of really interesting themes about compulsory heterosexuality and homosexuality, and as well as some really interesting thoughts on the concept of the spontaneous queer exception and rebuttal to that concept as a whole, which I greatly enjoyed. There's some interesting delving into womanhood and motherhood too here, with the age gap between Therese and Carol, as well as Therese's views of her own coworkers and Carol's friends. The back half of the book even throws in a very dramatic private investigator subplot that was kind of the low point of the novel for me, but still enjoyable, still miles above anything else that I've read recently, and is just great. Even has a happy ending, which kind of just isn't expected for for queer stories written in this kind of era, but it's greatly appreciated here. Amazing queer coming of age stories in a sense, and it's just absolutely phenomenal. One of my favorite books I've ever read, in definite contention for the top slot. If you read anything I read this month, this is my foremost suggestion. That is all I read this month, though. Pretty fun month, pretty heavy, dense month. I got through 4 books this month, and one of them was a thicker one. So we'll see what I read next month. It might be a bit of a slowdown, but still, I enjoyed greatly what I read this month, and I hope whatever you happened to read this last month was excellent as well. And that's all for now. Thank you.